Welcome to the In-Betwixt and In-Between. This is Leadership Limbo, a podcast aimed at helping leaders embrace the discomfort and power of leading themselves and others in the midst of it all. We blend real insight with practical tools to help you lead with self-awareness, purpose, and influence wherever you are on your leadership journey. I'm John Clark, one of your hosts, and on the other side of the screen for me, in a nice gray shirt there, Josh Hugo. How's it going, man?
Hey, it's going well. This is honoring a little bit of my Irish tradition. It's the Guinness shirt.
Oh, nice.
I'm not sponsored by Joe Montana, but if he was interested in having the privilege of being an advertiser for our show, Joe, if you're listening to this podcast, it's 2 for 1. We advertise Guinness and whatever brand you want us to promote for you as well.
We're always promoting endorsements from famous people, and I like that. Yeah, this shirt I like, kind of comfortable. I don't know where I got it. We found it in the house, and Meg is saying, "Oh, this is your shirt." And I go, "I've never seen that shirt before." So if you're a friend of ours who left a shirt at our house and we didn't know about it, let us know. It fits me, and most of my friends are smaller than me, so I don't know.
Not mine.
Meg's determined I bought it, and I'm, you did that Stitch Fix thing where they send you some clothes and you keep some of them, and she goes, "I think you got it through that." And I go, "I definitely did not get it through that." But we're each standing firm in our beliefs about how this shirt came to be in our house. But it's comfortable. I like it. It's got
another little brand shop there.
We're in a real bind. I can go like Jedi Knight on it, sort of situation. So
you do look like a Jedi Knight. For those who are not visually watching this, you do, and also Stitch Fix.
I love Stitch Fix.
We're just doing free advertisements for folks today. So Stitch Fix, Guinness. Wow. Yeah, we've really sold out, everyone.
My version of purgatory is if somebody said you have to shop in a department store for the rest of your life. So Stitch Fix was always this happy in between of they send me clothes, I send them, I try them on quickly, and then I send them off. Like walking around, that is so much better than walking around a department store, which I just hate. I abhor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't buy clothes.
Yeah, that's the other. Well, that's what ended up happening. I get clothes and it's got like 3 holes in it. And I said, "This is good enough." And Meg's like, "What is wrong with you? Buy some new clothes." So
anyway. I guess we share that distaste for department stores. So we're not going to be doing ads for Macy's.
No, we're not. If you like this shirt and it's yours, let me know. But I'd prefer to keep it. So even if it is yours, but you don't really need it, just let me keep it. It's a nice shirt. Okay. So
and that's a plug though for we are now putting our videos on YouTube. So if you prefer this medium to be visual and get a look at us as we are doing the podcast, we'll put the YouTube channel in our podcast notes as well. We're going to throw clips up on there. So the visual opportunities will only abound further beyond what they've currently been on LinkedIn only.
Going to be thinking a lot more about our stylistic choices every time we jump on a podcast. So, come and check us out for the style tips. That's really what we're here for. Great. Well, getting past our shirt choice or whatever fell into our laps in terms of shirts, Josh, let's get going on today's episode. What do we got going here?
Yeah. So if you've been following in order, the last number of episodes, we've really been spending a lot of time on communication. And I think communication exists across really any part of what we're talking about, but we really kind of did this explicit deep dive into transmitting, receiving, our mindsets around it. One of the first things that we believed stems from that conversation is the importance of development. So what are we using all this communication mindfulness for, right? Like communication in isolation is great, but we're really trying to drive home the value of applied science, if you will, applied practice in our podcast. And so we wanted to spend more time today and over the course of the next several episodes thinking about one of the most important responsibilities you have as a manager, which is that of developing others, utilizing your better sense that you might now have, your greater level of insights around your transmission and reception of communication, and start to apply it in the form of developing the people around you. So we want to spend some time today kind of at the higher level in this first episode around development, thinking about the mindsets of what an excellent managerial development mindset might look like. And we're going to start with you sharing a bit, John, for our listeners about a model that we're going to kind of talk through and react to. And then we're going to spend a little time in the second half of the podcast today looking at some of the mindset questions that do come up for all of us. And they're going to kind of be framed as questions that might get in the way of being an effective developer as a manager. So before I hand it to you, I think the other piece that I've actually talked with a few people recently who've been listening to the podcast, and one of the the analogies that has seemed very helpful for people as I've introduced it, and credit again to the 100X Leader book that really introduces the concept of the Sherpa. But if you think back to previous podcasts where we tried to create the overall managerial mindset at large, that the best thing you do as a manager is fight for the highest good of others. And developing others is truly a manifestation of that belief. So this is, I think, a little additional frame for today's conversation, is thinking about today through that lens of the Sherpa. And so, John, love to hear more about a model that I don't really know that much about. So we're going to kind of use today to kind of have you share what you know about it and have a little dialogue.
Yeah, and I think to kind of build into the model I'm going to share about, an important thing about development, I think in part, we're talking about how do you develop individuals to grow and to get stronger. There's lots of different purposes for development, and I'm sure we'll talk about all those. There's the development of a healthy team. So how are you developing people to be part of a team, even if they're all excellent at their role? Does it fit into the cohesive whole? So what's that development look like? What does the development of a strong contributor look like, but you need to help them to elevate their voice or elevate the way that they work with others better, some of those more interpersonal things. And sometimes it's how do you develop others to be able to advocate for something because maybe they've been on teams before where that's not ideal. So there's lots of different ones. And I think today's is going to fit into all the modes of development and the ways you might develop people or develop teams or develop yourself in the eyes of your manager, whatever it might be. And it's really about the type of voice you want in terms of how you support people. And again, like all things that Josh and I talk about, it's going to start a little bit more with internally, who do you want to be as a developer of people and teams? And what are the different voices that you can sometimes fall into that are negative? And then what's the counter to that? So this actually came out through some coaching that I've done the last couple weeks with an organization here in Denver. And I'm getting the chance to meet with folks one-on-one and chat. And one of those folks brought up that in our conversation, what came up was, oh yeah, I've been similarly hearing about this from my manager in the form of the drama triangle. And I had heard of the drama triangle before, but we pulled that up and then believe it or not, it came up in a second conversation and I had that image on the ready when I pulled it up and we talked about it again. And so the drama triangle overall is the way that we handle difficulties or challenges. And I think today the unique thing Josh and I are going to talk about is a lot of times it's about how this mindset works with you and then how you communicate things differently. And it's starting with that, but now it's like how that mindset shifts to the way you manage others. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about basically these three different archetypes or points on the drama triangle and explain what those are and why people fall into those, both as members of a team, but also as managers specifically, right? But we want to counteract that with, well, what is the persona you should take on instead of that? That's going to counteract those tendencies. Does that make sense?
It does.
You go online and Google drama triangle. There's all sorts of ones. We're looking at one here that's called the Karpman drama triangle, and that might be it for everything. But this is a pretty, it's one that a lot of folks use. And so I think people will find when you look at these, you're going to find not that you fall into one of these all the time, that there are different times where you've dipped into these because the moment has called for it or the challenge kind of forced this out of you and this reaction from you. And so hopefully what we can do is help you to name that, know that, and then counterbalance it with this other way that will help you to better support people and develop them and put them into action and build their agency and autonomy. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you ready to get going here, Josh? I think what we'll do is I'll describe these for you. You and I will have a discussion about it. And so that helps us to unpack it more.
Yeah.
And then we'll go into, well, how do you counteract that particular one? Okay.
Great.
So the first one I want to talk about here is, we'll call this one, it's called the Persecutor. It can also be the villain. Okay. So this is, I will say this is more of your authoritarian leader or member of a team. They don't value other people's views and the other people's integrity. So one second, I'm going to cough here. They tend to be more aggressive. And, I don't think aggressive is always a bad thing if it's tempered well. Like a lot of times members of a team like being a part of a person who takes action, right? But they can be aggressive. They might be more judgmental of other people's views or opinions. They're going to be highly critical people. In the work I do, we call this having a high criticality if it's not tempered. This can lead into things like actually being kind of a bully, being kind of demanding, spiteful, and scornful. You think the way to get things done is just to tell people how to do them, right? To decide that I'm going to go forward. I'm going to tell you to do this. And even when it's kind of muted, what this is the micromanager, right? You're seeing somebody do it some way. You feel like you know the best way. And so therefore you kind of basically give them the little ways of doing it so that they never develop their own voice or way of doing things, and rather just doing it based on the way that you tell them to execute it. Right. So a little bit about the persecutor. Questions or other additions to how you've seen the persecutor play out, Josh?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good description. And, utilizing frameworks that we've talked about before, in some ways, this might be a person who brings a lot of challenge, but doesn't really bring the level of support. So someone who dominates. Certain personalities, I think, can lean towards this style. And as I'm looking at some of the images here, I see this word blame as well. So some of this strikes me as a person who often externalizes accountability and kind of pushes responsibilities or blames others. It's kind of like that maxim we often talk about, is like a really great leader takes ownership of the problems and celebrates others for the successes. And this sounds like the inverse of that. Somebody who kind of blames everyone else for the problems and owns the successes. So kind of like the Kevin Spacey character on Horrible Bosses.
All right. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So what is kind of the different persona we want to take instead of the persecutor or the villain, right? And in that case, we actually want to be the challenger. Okay. So the reason challenger in this case is that you actually, yes, you might have a particular angle. You really believe that it should be done a certain way, but rather than taking complete control of others and bullying them, you actually challenge them. You provoke them to take action. You actually say, hey, I want to push you to tell us what to do here. So you still have that more, I would say, aggressive lens, but in a healthier way. You're empowering them to move forward and take something on and try it. And in that way, you're also entrusting them, if there's failure here, there could be failure, but I'm going to support you, but I want to challenge you to try it a different way. So instead of saying, I'm so fearful of the failure that the team could undergo or this person could go, that I'm just going to tell them how to do it and we're going to get the result by sheer will from me, you're actually saying, I believe in you, but I'm challenging you. We still have to get to that outcome. So how are we going to do it? So in that way, it counteracts, instead of being the villain, but you kind of feel this need to take a little bit more agency and take charge a bit more. It's more about taking charge in a way that empowers others and puts that challenge onto them. And so there's still a little pressure with that, but it's at least putting it back in their court to help make decisions and help move things forward. And it creates a healthier dialogue between the two of you, of where like you're going to be able to tell that actually I see an issue with that. Let's talk about where the challenge might be. So again, I think the point of this is that's a persona that mirrors the villain, but isn't going completely hands off or backing down from the situation completely.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation, and it resonates, makes sense. I think a couple thoughts come to mind for me, and this I think will apply to all, is part of this, when you look at this image, if you're a listener and you're not looking at this, well, even if you're watching it, we're not sharing our images here, but when you do look at this image, this kind of gets at this idea that all of us are, with our tendencies, we have kind of the dark side and the light side, or like one side of the coin, the other side of the coin. And so not to say that you couldn't have the dark tendency of being a villain and a hero. But for the most part, my assumption here is that most of us will lean towards one of these tips of the triangle. And so I think, one, recognizing that if what we're sharing here, no one wants to say I'm a villain, but if you are a person who's hearing this and thinking about, I do tend to have some more dominating tendencies, I am more aggressive in my challenge towards people, the strength available here for you is the ability to be a really effective challenger. And what I'm hearing also is, this kind of goes to Edwin Friedman, and I could show this, but like, this is a good book worth reading here. Yeah, it doesn't really show up well on the screen, A Failure of Nerve. But he talks about the idea that people aren't going to learn and grow if they're walking away from you. And I don't mean physically even walking away, but a great challenger puts the burden on the other person to say, almost like, I'm not sure that you're ready for me to give you this feedback, because I actually don't believe I've heard anything so far that makes me believe you're interested in hearing it. Wait, what do you mean? I'm interested in hearing this. Okay, well then here it is. I want to, like, almost you have to hook, like a great challenger can bring people into the idea of, wait, I'm going to turn around and come towards you now.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is, if you're a less intentional villain or a less intentional persecutor, you're probably causing people to walk away from you. And you can get louder, you can get angrier, you can get more direct, you can get venomous, you can get villainous, all of those things, but that's not drawing that person towards you. So flip your coin over, go from the dark side to the light side of this, challenge people, but you don't challenge them by being louder. You challenge them by hooking them in. And I think the phrase here, it says you provoke others to take action. You should not be doing all of the work as the challenger. You need to challenge them to do all of the work and flip that cognitive ratio to the person,
Yeah.
not yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's important for people who maybe find themselves falling into tendencies that align with a persecutor or the villain. Is sometimes people give them feedback of, "Hey, you're getting results, but it's at the cost of how you empower people." And they'll say, "Well, you're just asking me to be soft, or you're asking me to soft pedal things." I actually think the challenger still gives you some of that edge, right? It still allows that, but you're right. How am I hooking you in to want to get to a strong result? But seeing that, and that I'm entrusting you and empowering you and I believe in you, but I'm also going to like make sure we get this right. It's a fine balance, but I don't think you lose that edge that sometimes people think you have to lose, right?
Yeah.
Which actually is a good segue into the next persona if we're ready to go there. So
Good.
this one it can be called the rescuer or the hero. I personally think, at least in my line of work, this is the one that people fall into the most often, right? And so in this mode, it's funny. I'm going to say it this way, but I'm going to say how people think about it. You actually don't value other people's capacity to help themselves. Most people say, I want to reduce other people's suffering, or I don't love seeing people hurt, or I know it's a big challenge for them, so I take it on for them. And so it seems nice, right? But what you're actually doing is you're saying, like, I am not, as a manager or as a developer of you, deep down, I don't believe you can get there on your own. And if I push you a little bit, I think you'll break down. Like, I think
I don't trust you.
Yeah. I think you'll break down, or it'll make it hard for you. And so I'm going to make it easier. In the Kim Scott framework around radical candor, this is ruinous empathy, right? Is the other part of that. And so you appear in these cases to be self-sacrificing. That's also a negative side of this. You actually do it so that you can be oh, I'm the hero. I came in to save you. I want you to like me you're the martyr. You are overly helpful. You're too facilitative. In the work I do with Behavioral Essentials, if you have really high support, that sounds awesome, until as a manager, you're actually taking on more from people and you disempower them. You take away their agency. And some people are okay with that and they lean into that and they manipulate you and allow you to do that. Others get really angry. Like, you're just taking this off of me. So again, like to be needed. And it can lead to even feeling like you're meddling too much or engulfing others. You're seeing like one little problem and you jump in to say, how can I save you? How can I help you? Right. And again, one of these is it seeks temporary relief. So you're relieving them now, but you aren't helping that person in the long run to get better at something. Right. Or to help your team get better at it. Right. Thoughts, Josh?
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't want to hit all of that again, but I think a real piece of resonance there in a recent conversation I had with another person was, I know that you're trying to prevent me from feeling, this pain or the suffering, or that you try to prevent other people from not, feeling the challenge, right? Like, and what does that mean about your belief in me, that I can't experience that? Like, to not allow me the opportunity and the responsibility to work together towards a mutual solution? It actually, and the response is, I hadn't thought of it that way. And I think that's why these frameworks are helpful for awareness, to say, yeah, you're not actually, had a session recently and there was some pushback on this idea of what's wrong with being a person who protects others. Aren't we trying to protect other people? I think that it's a deep question. It's part of our identity. It's part of our story. It's part of our family history, right? There's a lot intertwined in why we think about taking care of others in a certain way. And it's easy to kind of conclude quickly that like taking care of others is some noble pursuit, which it can be and absolutely is in industries like education or healthcare. But at the same point, like, are you actually challenging this other person to grow and find autonomy and find agency within themselves if you overly are protective, or if you're a hero, if you're a martyr? The answer is no. And it's really important to kind of help somebody who has that tendency to see, I know you're trying to be this person for others, but what you're actually saying underneath it doesn't actually value me.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's an eye opener for people, because they're like, I hadn't thought of it like that. Mm-hmm. That's not what I want to do.
Yep.
But if we don't catch that cycle, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. I think people who fall into this often think of themselves as altruistic and very caring. And so when you actually hear about the manipulative side of this that might be more ingrained, it's hard to hear that. Right. And so what's the counter to this? Similar to challenger still giving the edge that sometimes the villain wants, for the hero or the rescuer, the counter to that is coach. Okay. Which will lean into the tendency in these moments to want to support people. But the coach is facilitating self-empowerment, essentially, right? I'm going to empower you through questioning by allowing you to come up with solutions and ideas how to work through this. We're not going to hide from the emotion that you're feeling. I think sometimes when you're in the hero mode, you're like, "Ooh, I don't like watching you suffer, so I want to get rid of that as quick as I can by doing this for you." The coach actually leans into that and says, "Well, what would it mean to help you move past this difficulty? What would success look like and how can we get there?" So I love the frame. I heard this early in my teaching career. This person is the guide by your side, not the sage on stage. Like, I'm not here to show you how to do it and get it done for you and take this off your plate. I'm here to help walk you through this. I'll be here through you through every step of this to make sure you get it. But at the end of it, you're going to feel like you were empowered to do something about it versus letting someone else like myself do it for you. And
Mhm.
so this is where using questioning is a lot more important, where you allow them to name the next steps, where you allow them to name what success looks like. Sometimes that might lead to the person saying, "This is too much for me. I can't do it." And you say, "Okay, then maybe you're not right for this responsibility or for this thing or for this challenge," versus, "Oh, I'm sorry. Let me do that for you so we can get past this." That's when this gets difficult as a coach as well. So
Yeah.
again, I think that helps people who are in this hero mentality of want to help others not feel like this is kind of the same edge as the challenger, perhaps in those moments,
Right.
but it's going to get to the same outcome to a certain degree as what that challenger is doing.
Yeah, and that same outcome being that your job as a manager, as a leader, as a coach is to get the other person to find the answers within them, not compel them towards that by, abuse or domination or to take over and protect them from that agency themselves. And so that's a real paradigm shift as a manager and as a leader and as a teacher is that yes, you're not the sage on stage. The other person is the master of their own domain and the master of their story. You have to find what tendencies you have that might be less effective, whether it's persecuting or rescuing, and flip it around. Use that as a strength to get the other person to kind of take on that role about like, they don't develop themselves. You serve as a function of their development, but you are not doing it for them or you're not forcing them to do it.
Yep. And you might think, well, coach and challenger sound pretty close. And they probably do to a certain degree. Challengers maybe that more like, "Hey, I'm directing you. I believe you. You take action. You've got this," versus, "I'm going to force you to do it." This one is, um, let's, let's build the skill and the muscle to help you get there. I'm going to help you, but you're going to be answering these questions along the way. And that leads us to our last one, which is the the first persona is the victim. Okay. And this can happen to you as a manager. It can also, and you might see it in the people you manage. Like, this is too much. You are in the mode of not valuing yourself or you're deferring to others. You don't believe in yourself. There's too many things that you're up against, right? Story for me, like, I think there were points in my career where I fall into all of these negative archetypes. And at the birth of my first child, it was a pretty difficult time. She was diagnosed with Down syndrome. We weren't expecting it. And as I came back through work, there were also some difficult things happening at work at that time. And I think rather than leaning into that of, great, what's the direction and action we need to do? It was a little bit of that. This is too much. I've got this big thing happening in my personal life around my firstborn, and I'm coming into a workplace where, we were in our third year of opening the school, and that's a typical time for people to start, especially if they've been there for a couple of years, to question what's going on. And I think rather at times that year than saying, "Great, what's the action and what solution are we trying to create?" I fell back into, "This is too hard." And I then think that was deflected out to others. It was like, "Guys, this is so much for me. Can you all help do something?" That's not inspiring leadership. It just isn't. It's just not inspiring. And so when you become the victim, what actually happens is, yeah, people might feel sympathy for you, but you're not inspiring them to take action. You're kind of just leaning into, "Woe is me, this is all too much." And you know what happens with the people you lead? They think it's too much, or they think, "Well, if that person doesn't know what direction we're going in, how can I know what direction we're going in?" So it can, in some ways I was being manipulative. Like, look at my emotions and how bad this is for me. If you think it's bad for you, you're off because it's even worse for me. So there's manipulation in that. There's obviously the poor me. I feel helpless. I'm complaining. Just all these things. I'm blaming others, or I'm blaming the system, or whatever it might mean. And that can be really hard. And if you're a manager leading from that way, and then you're kind of putting that as empowering others, no, you're actually asking them to pity you. And then you're not making decisions. You're not addressing the challenge. And so everything kind of falls apart. They all become the victims. And even if you have people on your team that do that, and you're just like, "Oh, I'm so sorry for you," you're not actually empowering them, right? A little bit more. And And they just lean more into the problem than they do into what's the solution, which we'll get to in a minute. But thoughts on the victim mindset, Josh?
Yeah, it's just such a hard archetype. And I do think that I mean, I appreciate your own kind of humility and vulnerability to share like how that fit into your life. And I think this is a hard one. I mean, I'm sure there's absolutely times an anecdote doesn't rise to the top for me, but I know as far as a trigger goes, like for my own style of leadership, working with people who take a victim mentality is really challenging. It's just challenging. Like, so I had kind of an emotional reaction almost just to thinking about this archetype, this personality, this mindset really towards self and towards others. And it's a really draining and a really potentially toxic personality on a team. So if you're a manager of a person with this, I'm excited to hear what you're going to share in a minute is the flip side of this. And if you personally identify as somebody who falls into this victim mindset, it's first of all, it's hard to admit that. But two, if you've been able to admit that and identify it, good for you. That's a really helpful identification. But you have a superpower available. Like if this is your disposition, and I would love to hear, John, as you kind of go to this last part here, what the flip side of a victim mentality is that could actually be repurposed in a way that's beneficial to yourself and to the team.
Well, and I'm just going to push back a little bit on what you said, because I think the way that was framed was, well, it sounded like, hey, if you got a person who's a victim and they're kind of toxic, I'm sorry for you. I think we all fall into all these archetypes, and each of us, because of things happen in our life, it can be potential for us to fall into the victim thing. The world feels too big. It feels too hard. The situation feels so challenging, and who could possibly figure out how to go beyond it? So I just want to say, like, if you're feeling this, or if you think like, oh, that'll never be me, it might be,
It can be.
It doesn't mean you're going to slip into it, because you hopefully will have listened to this podcast and come up with a way of, oh, I know what this feeling is right now, and I want to move past that. So the kind of shadow persona to this, or I think the more light persona, is the creator. You claim personal power. You say, I see the challenge and I'm going to acknowledge that challenge. I'm going to hit it head on. I'm going to say it exists. And I want to think of solutions or ways of moving past it and feeling like, what do we have in our favor that can help us move past this? A little bit of coach, but I think it's actually more of, you are up against big obstacles or things, and yet you kind of rise above them to say, like, sitting here and feeling this isn't going to help me to go further. Or if I'm feeling this way about myself as a manager, my team needs me to lead them. So I need to come up with the solutions that we're all going to tackle together to get past this issue, versus saying like, sorry team, this is too hard for me to lead you on. Let's just like buckle up and get through it. You're saying tough situation, but I believe we got the people here to figure it out, and here's how we're going to do, and let's go. We're going to create what we need to push ourselves past this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, you might see alignment with coach and challenger there, but I think this is really rising above taking the big challenge and creating that new, like, great, what's the counter to that? How are we going to overcome this? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think just in sum, I think this is a really helpful paradigm, because it really is all about flipping from tendencies we might all have. And I will agree with that point. I'm not saying that I've never felt that. Like, you can ask my partner, Lindy, about lying on the ground last week, just going through 50 minutes of, things that I was feeling frustrated about. So I think we go into, probably to some extent, all of these, maybe in a slightly different ratio. I think the key is awareness, self-awareness, identifying where you're at and recognizing, like, if this is a tendency, there is the availability of just flip the coin over, so to speak, to find the opportunity with those tendencies. And so appreciate the push. I agree with that. And I think that the goal in this model is to allow for people to see the availability of opportunities with all of our tendencies, and really appreciate having this tool in our toolbox.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, to wrap on it, you're going to have a tendency to fall into any of these at any point. Maybe at work, you tend to show up more like the villain, like, oh, I kind of direct my team and I know where to go. But in your personal life, you're very accommodating of your kids and you take on things for them so that you can just get it done for them, versus like making them take the time to learn it. Perhaps with your mom, you tend to play, when you're talking to her, you tend to play the victim a lot. So my point is, you can fall into a lot of these. And so it's not like, John, I only play the villain ever. It's knowing when you're slipping into these habits and pushing yourself past it, so you're empowering and challenging and helping others to claim their agency in something, when it comes up. So hopefully giving the language helps with that, so you can name it for yourself when it's occurring. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thinking ahead, I mean, I think this is a good place for us to pause for today. I think that's a lot of good content. And earlier had mentioned we might move into some of like the common questions that almost move out of this theoretical model into like really pragmatic, like, is this really my job to develop people? They were hired for this. Shouldn't they be able to do it? I think next week we can touch on a little bit more of that to kind of come back to the ways that this model actually shows up. Because sometimes you hear a model, you're like, well, that's not me, or maybe that's me. I think there's a lot of ways that this actually shows up. And so we'll come back to this concept in a future week. I really do appreciate having this, I had not seen this model before. So thank you for going through it. And I think that homework, to think about for this week, John, what do you think people should be doing with this information as they listen to this podcast?
Yeah. Think about a person that you're managing right now. If you're not managing a person, it can be a teammate that you work closely with. It can be your partner. It can be your kid. I mean, it can be any person in your life. And think about what are the tendencies that you tend to fall into when you're supporting or helping that person. Are you more of the persecutor, like always kind of on top of them, telling them what to do? Are you the rescuer? You see them struggling with something and you do it for them. Or do you lean into a victim, like working with this person is too hard for me and it's such a challenge and I'm just going to let them do whatever they want. Name that and then ask yourself, how am I going to lean into one of the other personas? How am I going to be a challenger instead, or a good coach, or I'm going to be the creator with them, right? And just work on it with that person, or if you don't have a specific person in mind, just be mindful of when those opportunities are coming up, name it for yourself, and then go through some exercises to kind of turn that on its head. Hopefully people have some fun with that this week. Would love to hear how people are doing that, how they're trying that out and how that's supporting them in their work with others and helping others to develop themselves.
Thanks, John. I think that's a great place for us to leave it today. Thank you again for all of our listeners who continually engage and who share this podcast with others, and for subscribing and commenting, whether it be on our LinkedIn or individual messages on the side, or even more publicly on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So please continue to engage. We do want this to be collaborative. We also do want to know what you would be interested in hearing in future sessions. Continue to be part of our community. So until next time, this has been Leadership Limbo, where we make space for the tension and tools for the journey. See you in the in-between.